At the age of 8, he immigrated to the United States with his parents from Taiwan. Less than 3 years later, his father passed away, leaving his mother to raise 3 children on her own, isolated and unwelcome in a foreign land. Life as an immigrant child was never easy, but no one could have imagined that the loneliness and emotional repression he endured would lead him to fall in love with his middle school teacher, a deeply obsessive love that lasted for 15 years. Despite the vast difference in age, it was this fixation that ultimately gave rise to an unforgivable crime. Welcome back to Crime Documentary Files. In today's video, we will explore 2 dark and distorted love stories. 2 cases, 2 different countries, but both are equally haunting and worth examining. Let's begin. In the early morning hours of May 17, 1980, a man rushed into the Roseville Police Department in Roseville, Minnesota. He identified himself as Erwin Stauffer and reported that his wife, Mary Stauffer, and their 8-year-old daughter, Beth Stauffer, had not returned home after leaving a hair salon the previous afternoon. Police immediately launched an investigation. According to Erwin, before their disappearance, Mary and Beth had been preparing to attend a family gathering related to an upcoming missionary trip to the Philippines. The last known location where they were seen was the parking lot near the hair salon. Investigators reviewed surveillance footage from the area. However, due to the limited camera coverage at the time, the footage was extremely unclear. All that could be seen was Mary and Beth walking toward their car when an Asian man wearing black-framed glasses approached them. Shortly afterward, the footage cut out. With the video providing so little usable information, police were forced to search for other leads. While officers were still conducting the initial investigation into the disappearance of Mary and Beth, another emergency call came in. The callers were a married couple reporting that their 6-year-old son, Jason Wilkman, had gone missing on the afternoon of May 16th. Jason had been riding his bicycle to his grandparents' house when he passed through a wooded area and never arrived. Children who were playing near the woods at the time told police they had seen Jason walking toward an unfamiliar vehicle. After the vehicle drove away, Jason was never seen again. Police soon realized that the 2 disappearances had not only occurred in the same area, but also within nearly the same time frame, suggesting a possible connection between the cases. As a result, investigators began consolidating clues from both incidents, focusing their efforts on the remote wooded area Jason had entered before vanishing. At the edge of the forest, police discovered several suspicious tire tracks, along with a broken section of a child's bicycle chain. After comparison, the chain fragment was confirmed to be part of Jason's bicycle. Following the tire tracks deeper into the area, officers then found a piece of a broken license plate. A records check revealed that the plate belonged to Mary's vehicle. This discovery further confirmed a strong link between the 2 cases, but it also pushed the investigation into a new dead end. Police were left asking themselves, why would Mary's car appear in the forest? Was she a victim, or was there something more going on? At the same time, some investigators raised another possibility. Could the entire incident have been staged by Erwin himself? After all, he was Mary's husband and had ample opportunity to be with her. The theory was not entirely unfounded. Given the social climate at the time, there had been cases in which family members staged disappearances due to personal conflicts. More importantly, after closely reviewing the surveillance footage, police noted that the unidentified man seen in the parking lot bore a strong resemblance to Erwin. Police immediately questioned Erwin about his whereabouts on the afternoon of May 16th. Erwin stated that he had been at home preparing items for the family gathering and that neighbors had come by and could confirm his presence. However, while the neighbors' statements verified that Erwin was home for most of the time, they could not completely rule out the possibility that he had left briefly. To verify Erwin's account, police administered a polygraph test. During the first test, Erwin was extremely nervous, and several readings fluctuated, which heightened investigators' suspicions. Police then conducted a second polygraph examination. This time, Erwin appeared calmer, and the results indicated that he was not lying. Furthermore, after reviewing Erwin's personal relationships and financial situation, police found that he and Mary had a harmonious marriage, with no signs of infidelity or financial disputes. There was no apparent motive for him to harm Mary. At that point, investigators were forced to eliminate Irwin as a suspect. The case returned to square one. Police expanded their search, canvassing nearby residents and asking whether anyone had seen suspicious individuals or vehicles, but once again, no useful information emerged. Just as the investigation stalled yet again, the phone at the police station suddenly rang. On the other end of the line was the weak but urgent voice of a woman. She identified herself as Mary Stauffer and said that she and her daughter Beth were being held captive at a house located at 160 Hamline Avenue in Roseville. She pleaded for police to come rescue them immediately. After confirming the address, officers were dispatched to the scene. Upon arrival, police found what appeared to be an ordinary residential home. They quietly approached the property and, after a careful search, discovered Mary and Beth in a severely distressed condition, hiding among the bushes in the backyard. Police immediately secured the area around the house and waited for the perpetrator to return. Later that afternoon, an Asian man wearing black-framed glasses appeared at the front door. Officers who had been lying in wait rushed forward and arrested him. Mary and Beth immediately identified the man on the spot as the person who had kidnapped and imprisoned them. His name was Ming-Sen Shui. After their rescue, Mary and Beth were transported to the hospital for treatment. At the same time, Mary gave police a detailed account of the horrific and inhumane experiences they had endured over the past 53 days. On the afternoon of May 16, 1980, Mary had taken her daughter Beth to a hair salon and was preparing to drive home. As Mary reached for her keys to unlock the car, an Asian man wearing black-framed glasses suddenly rushed toward them. He pressed a handgun against Beth's forehead and violently ordered both of them into the vehicle. Terrified, Beth began screaming, and Mary, fearing for her daughter's life, had no choice but to comply and get into the car. Throughout the drive, Mary repeatedly begged the man to let them go, promising that she would not contact the police. He remained silent the entire time, saying nothing, while keeping the gun firmly pointed at Beth. The car drove aimlessly for a while before the man ordered Mary to turn into a remote, deserted forest. After getting out of the car, the man pulled rope and duct tape from his clothing. He bound Mary and Beth's hands, gagged them, and forced them into the trunk. Inside the pitch-black trunk, fear spread uncontrollably. Beth sobbed quietly, while Mary could only whisper words of comfort to her daughter over and over again. No one knew how much time had passed before the car finally stopped. The man opened the trunk to check on them and discovered that Beth had managed to free herself, and that Mary Stauffer's restraints were nearly undone as well. Enraged, he retied both of them tightly, then wrapped duct tape around their heads, leaving only small openings around their noses so they could breathe. He even removed the spare tire and placed it on top of them to prevent any chance of escape. At that very moment, a young boy rode past on a bicycle, 6-year-old Jason. Seeing a car parked deep in the woods struck him as strange, and he approached to take a closer look. The man noticed Jason and immediately rushed toward him, restrained the boy, and threw him into the trunk. Terrified, Jason screamed loudly from inside the trunk. Annoyed by the noise, the man quickly stopped the car, dragged Jason deeper into the forest, and disappeared from sight. A few minutes later, he returned alone. Hearing the commotion outside, Mary realized that Jason had most likely been killed. Afterward, the man transferred Mary and Beth into another vehicle. After an unknown amount of time, the car finally stopped. They were taken into a residential house. He shoved them into a bedroom where a modified wardrobe stood. Inside it were a light bulb, pillows, and blankets. That night, Mary and Beth spent their first sleepless night confined inside the wardrobe. The next morning, the man brought them food for breakfast. Summoning all her courage, Mary asked for his identity and the reason he had kidnapped them. He responded with a cold smile, asking whether she truly didn't remember him, telling her to think carefully. Mary guessed several possibilities, but none were correct. Losing patience, he finally revealed the truth. His name was Ming-Sen Shui, a student Mary had taught 15 years earlier. He claimed he had kidnapped her because she had once given him a B, which he said cost him a scholarship, prevented him from getting into college, and ruined his entire life. Mary was completely stunned. She searched her memories, trying to recall her years of teaching and identify the man standing before her. What she didn't know was that Xiu's true motive was far darker than that, a twisted obsession that had been silently festering for years. After saying this, Xiu locked Beth in another location and, ignoring Mary's apologies and desperate pleas, subjected Mary to inhumane abuse and sexual assault. In the days that followed, Mingsen Xiu locked Mary and Beth inside the wardrobe during the day while he went to work. At night, he would release Mary and force her to cook for him. Almost every evening after dinner, Xiu demanded that the two of them play cards with him. He would then lock Beth back inside the wardrobe and force Mary to serve him as if she were his wife. He repeatedly threatened that if Mary did not comply, Beth would be killed. During this time, Xiu also forced Mary Stauffer to write a letter to her husband, Erwin. He made her lie, claiming she needed time away to relieve stress and wanted to temporarily separate from him, an attempt to mislead police and disrupt the investigation. In this way, Xiu began living what he considered a comfortable family life. On June 7th, he rented a camper vehicle and took Mary and Beth on a trip to Chicago. On July 4th, Independence Day, he took them out again to watch fireworks. As time passed, Xiu gradually became less cautious. At night, he no longer blocked the wardrobe door with heavy objects and allowed Mary to move freely within the bedroom. Then, on July 7th, the 53rd day of their captivity, while Xiu was away at work, Mary noticed that the chain securing the wardrobe door seemed slightly loose. She immediately began working from the gap in the door, inch by inch shifting the metal chain. With extraordinary determination, she finally succeeded in opening the wardrobe door. Unbeknownst to Xiu, Mary had previously memorized the delivery address on his dry-cleaned clothing, allowing her to determine their exact location. This time, she did not hesitate. She took Beth and used the phone inside the house to call the police. To avoid encountering Mingsen Xiu during their escape, the two hid quietly in the bushes in the backyard, waiting for officers to arrive. In the end, they were successfully rescued. Based on Mary's testimony and the evidence recovered from Xiu's home, including the letter Mary had been forced to write and Xiu's notebooks documenting his surveillance and kidnapping plans, police quickly began interrogating him. Faced with overwhelming and irrefutable evidence, Mingsen Xiu finally confessed to kidnapping Mary and Beth and to murdering Jason. To understand why Xiu committed such acts, police began re-examining his entire life. They quickly realized that this was not an impulsive crime, but rather the outcome of a person who had lived under long-term repression and psychological distortion, gradually veering off course until he completely lost control. Mingsen Xiu was born in 1950 in Taiwan. At the age of 8, he immigrated to the United States with his parents. His father was a professor at the University of Minnesota. When the family first arrived in the U.S., their life was relatively stable. However, in less than 3 years, his father died of illness, leaving Xiu's mother alone to raise 3 children. The death of his father drastically changed the family atmosphere. Forced to raise 3 children by herself, Xiu's mother was under immense pressure, and her parenting style became increasingly harsh and simplistic. In her eyes, Xiu was a rebellious, cold-hearted child. She frequently berated him, even describing him with words such as emotionless, like a stray dog. It was this prolonged rejection and toxic home environment that gradually shaped Xiu into a withdrawn and stubborn individual. At the age of 14, Xiu began exhibiting extreme behavior. He not only threw rocks at cars parked along the street, but also set fire to other people's homes for no apparent reason. After local authorities became aware of the situation, Xiu was ordered to undergo mandatory psychological treatment. During therapy, Xiu's mother told doctors that he frequently lied, always believed he was right, had an explosive temper, and often physically assaulted his younger siblings. Even more disturbing, Xiu displayed an almost obsessive fixation on women and had even secretly watched his own mother at night. After evaluation, psychologists concluded that Xiu suffered from a severe psychological disturbance, poor impulse control, pronounced aggression, and a deeply lonely and obsessive inner world. In 1965, At the age of 15, Xiao entered high school. Mary Stauffer became his mathematics teacher. From the moment he first met her, Xiao was captivated by her gentle and patient demeanor, and soon fell into an intense, one-sided infatuation. In order to get closer to Mary, he became unusually eager during math class, constantly competing to answer questions, solely to gain her attention and praise. But this secret crush quickly escalated into something far more extreme. Mingsen Shiwei began secretly stalking Mary. Every night he would go near her home and use binoculars to spy on her life. Over time, he learned the daily routines of Mary's entire family, what time she went to bed, which bedroom she and her husband slept in, and even where the spare house key was hidden. He later turned Mary into the central character of his own novel. In the story, Mary was the female lead, and he cast himself as the male protagonist. The entire book was filled with his twisted fantasies about her. After graduating from high school, Shui was admitted to the University of Minnesota with excellent grades and even received a scholarship. However, his obsession with Mary did not fade. In fact, it intensified, as attending college meant he could no longer see her regularly. Before long, Shu chose to drop out of college and opened an electronics shop near his former high school. On the surface, it was a business venture, but in reality, it allowed him to gather information about Mary Stauffer more easily. During that period, Mary's family went to the Philippines for missionary work. Shiwei subsequently lost track of her, plunging him into a frantic and obsessive search. Then, in 1975, Shiwei finally obtained what he believed was a crucial lead. He became convinced that a certain house in Minnesota belonged to Mary. Armed with a handgun, he stormed into the house, intending to kidnap her. Instead, he found only Mary's parents-in-law at home. Enraged and emotionally unhinged, Shiwei forced the elderly couple to the ground, tied them up with rope, and threatened to kill them if they contacted the police. Out of fear, Mary's parents-in-law chose to remain silent. They did not report the incident, and this decision inadvertently fueled Shiyu's growing recklessness. In 1979, when Mary's family returned to Minnesota, Shiyu was overjoyed. He immediately resumed stalking her, moved closer to her home, and frequently sneaked inside while the family was away. He would lie on the bed shared by Mary and her husband, inhaling her scent. During this time, Mingsen Shiwei even attempted to dig a hole from beneath Mary Stauffer's house, planning to kidnap her through an underground tunnel. However, the manual labor proved too physically demanding, and Shiwei eventually abandoned the plan, leaving behind only a small hole and pry marks on the bedroom floor. Although Irwin noticed these strange signs, he did not take them seriously, unaware that danger was steadily closing in. Not long afterward, Shiu learned that Mary's family was preparing to leave for the Philippines again for missionary work. The news sent him into complete panic. He feared that if he lost Mary this time, he would never be able to find her again. From that moment on, he resolved to kidnap her and keep her by his side forever. To carry out the abduction, Shiwei prepared in advance a handgun, rope, duct tape, and other tools. He also modified a wardrobe in his home, turning it into a makeshift holding cell for Mary. Finally, on May 16, 1980, he carried out the kidnapping he had meticulously planned for years. During interrogation, Shiwei also confessed in detail to how he killed Jason. He said that at the time, he was worried Jason had accidentally seen Mary and Beth and might run to alert the police. Acting on that fear, he decided to abduct Jason as well. However, Jason cried and struggled non-stop during the drive, which irritated Shiwei beyond control. In a fit of emotional rage, Shiwei dragged Jason deep into the woods and ultimately beat him to death. Shiwei also admitted that what he had previously told Mary, that he hated her for giving him a B grade, was a lie. In reality, his academic performance had always been excellent. He had never received anything lower than an A. He fabricated that story solely to make Mary feel guilty, so he could manipulate and control her more easily. As the evidence collected by police became increasingly complete, Shiui's crimes, kidnapping and abusing Mary and Beth and murdering Jason, were fully established. The horrifying case, born from a 15-year-long twisted obsession, finally moved toward trial. However, what shocked everyone was that, even as judgment approached, Xu showed no remorse. Instead, he secretly began plotting acts of retaliation, intent on inflicting further harm on Mary's family. Only a few days after being incarcerated, Mingsen Xu bribed an inmate nearing release named Richard Green. Xu gave him a $1,000 check, instructing him to murder Mary Stauffer and Beth after his release in order to prevent them from testifying in court. He also promised an additional $50,000 once the job was done. What Xu did not anticipate was that Richard Green reported everything directly to the police after his release. Authorities immediately increased protection for Mary and Beth, and Xiu's attempt to silence them failed completely. At the first trial, Mary took the stand as a witness. Xiu became emotionally unstable in court, repeatedly interrupting Mary's testimony, shouting at her and declaring that his love for her was not wrong. When the session ended, police intensified surveillance on Xiu to prevent him from committing any extreme acts. But Xiu did not stop. During the second trial, he secretly concealed a small knife on his person. As Mary once again testified, recounting her kidnapping and abuse, Xiu suddenly stood up, leapt over the courtroom railing, and lunged at her with the blade. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Police rushed in and subdued Xiu, but Mary suffered severe facial injuries. She was rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment and required 62 stitches. Afterward, Xiu's defense attorneys attempted to argue that he was mentally unstable, seeking a reduced sentence. To determine whether Xiu was truly mentally ill, the court commissioned a comprehensive psychological evaluation by professional experts. After extended observation and assessment, the psychologists reached a clear conclusion. Xiu did not suffer from any mental illness. All of his actions were driven by his own will, and he was fully capable of bearing criminal responsibility. In 1981, the case entered its sentencing phase. Xiu was sentenced to 30 years in prison for kidnapping and an additional 40 years for murder. Combined, he received a total sentence of 70 years in prison. Even after hearing the verdict, Mingsen Xu showed no remorse. Instead, he shouted in open court that even if he spent his entire life in prison, he would kill Mary's entire family once he was released. In 2010, Xiu became eligible for parole. When the news reached Mary's family, they were immediately plunged into fear and panic. They submitted formal objections to the court, expressing their grave concerns. Police in the court once again conducted a full risk assessment of Xiu. Based on expert psychological evaluations, the judge concluded that, although Xiu had been incarcerated for 30 years, his obsession with Mary and the danger he posed to society had not diminished. If released, there was a high likelihood that he would commit further crimes. As a result, the court denied Xiu's parole request. He would spend the remainder of his life behind bars. As of 2025, Mingsen Xu remains incarcerated at USP Marion, a federal prison. Mary, meanwhile, refused to let the 53-day nightmare define her life. With the support of her family and unwavering faith, she gradually emerged from the shadows of her past. Today, Mary and Erwin are retired and living a quiet, peaceful life in their longtime home in Hermantown. When asked whether she had forgiven Xiu, Mary calmly replied, "Hatred only keeps me trapped in pain. I have to live well. That is the best form of redemption for myself." Beth later said, "Mingsen Xu didn't destroy our lives. He destroyed his own." In the end, Xiu's 15-year obsession cost him the rest of his life behind bars. Yet justice does not always arrive in time. Some tragedies unfold too quickly, too brutally, when distorted emotions don't need 15 years to erupt, but only a single moment of desperation to steal the lives of the innocent. The next case, which took place in China, will show us exactly that. On August 21, 2011, inside room 606 of a hotel in Chuzhou City, Anhui Province, China, a homicide occurred that sent chills even through the most seasoned police officers. When investigators entered the room, they were confronted with a horrific scene: 3 female bodies lying in pools of blood. The air was thick with the metallic stench of blood. Among the victims, one was an adult woman, while the other 2 were underage girls. According to preliminary forensic findings, the adult woman had been stabbed repeatedly in the chest and neck, suffering more than 30 stab wounds across her body. The two young girls were also fatally stabbed, with wounds concentrated in the chest and neck, each child bearing more than a dozen stab wounds. The killer showed no mercy, even toward children. The sheer brutality of the crime was deeply shocking. The suspect appears to have been mentally unstable, and the method used was extremely violent, one investigator commented. In the aftermath of the murders, the residents of Chuzhou were thrown into panic. Rumors spread that the perpetrator was a sadistic serial killer. Some women were reportedly afraid to go out alone following the incident. The case had a severe negative impact on public safety, prompting the Chuzhou Public Security Bureau to vow a swift resolution in order to restore calm to the community. As the investigation progressed at full speed, a woman's handbag found at the crime scene caught the attention of police. Its contents had clearly been rummaged through, and all cash was missing, suggesting a possible motive of robbery followed by murder. But could money alone explain such ruthless violence, especially against children? Police believed otherwise. They concluded that the crime was not purely financially motivated, but rather a targeted killing, possibly driven by a deep, irreconcilable personal grudge between the suspect and the victims. Using a mobile phone left at the scene, police contacted the victims' relatives and confirmed their identities. The adult woman was Chen Lei Quan, 27 years old, a native of Kaihua County, Chuzhou City. The two girls were Chen Jialuo, Lei Quan's 5-year-old daughter, and Xu Xian, her 7-year-old niece. After confirming the victims' identities, police visited Lei Quan's family to gather background information. Her parents stated that Lei Quan was the youngest child in the family and had been deeply cherished. She, in turn, treated her parents and siblings with kindness and was widely praised by neighbors for her character. 5 years earlier, Lei Quan had gotten married. After giving birth to her daughter, she and her husband Liu, a carpenter, moved to Suzhou to open a clothing shop. However, due to poor business performance, the shop was transferred 2 years earlier, and Lei Quan returned alone to Ningbo, Zhejiang province, to work odd jobs. 1 month before the murder, Lei Quan returned to her hometown in Kaihua County. On the afternoon of August 19th, she told her parents that she planned to take her daughter and niece into the city to spend time with an old friend, and then left the house. However, because she did not mention the friend's name or address, her parents had no idea where she was going. During the investigation, an unusual detail caught police attention. They noticed that after learning of his daughter's death, Lei Quan's father had repeatedly tried to call his son-in-law, who was working in Suzhou, but no one ever answered. Mr. Chen further explained that Liu was a live-in son-in-law, meaning that after marriage he lived with his wife's family. Any children born, sons or daughters alike, were required to take the Chen family surname. In traditional Chinese culture, where children typically inherit their father's surname, this arrangement is often difficult to accept. In Mr. Chen's eyes, Liu was an unsatisfactory son-in-law. He failed to earn money, was addicted to alcohol, and had a gambling habit. Lei Quan frequently scolded her husband over these issues. Could this unusual family arrangement and troubled marriage have concealed potential danger? And was Liu's prolonged lack of contact connected to the case? Police decided to focus their investigation on him. Investigators theorized that Liu, after enduring long-term verbal abuse from his wife and resentment over his status as a live-in son-in-law, might have developed deep hostility that eventually led to murder. Acting on this suspicion, police quickly located Liu. However, the results of the investigation completely overturned this theory. Not only did Liu have a solid alibi during the time of the murders, but he was also at his workplace almost continuously both before and after the crime. Aside from sleeping, he rarely left the worksite, giving him no opportunity to commit the murders. More importantly, during questioning, police observed no intense resentment or hostility toward Lei Quan, nor any clear motive for murder. At that point, Liu was fully ruled out as a suspect. After eliminating Liu, police turned back to the physical evidence. Based on the dozens of stab wounds on the 3 victims, Investigators concluded that the killer had to be a physically strong adult male, significantly stronger than Lei Quan. Guided by this assessment, forensic technicians collected more than 10 small droplets of blood from the bedroom floor, the bathroom floor, and the sink. DNA analysis confirmed the investigators' suspicion. In addition to the blood of the 3 female victims, there was also blood belonging to an adult male. In addition, investigators discovered an opened cup of instant noodles on the coffee table in the room, along with a torn packet of rat poison. Based on this, police initially theorized that the killer may have mixed rat poison into the noodles, tricked the 3 victims into eating it, and then stabbed them one by one after they were no longer able to resist. However, when forensic examiners conducted preliminary autopsies, they found no traces of rat poison in the victims' bodies. None of them had been poisoned. Given this finding, police speculated that the rat poison might have been ingested by the killer himself in an attempt to commit suicide. But this raised further questions. Why would the killer want to take his own life? Did he ingest the poison, survive, and then flee? Or did the killer die at the scene, only for someone else to later enter the room and remove his body? With these questions in mind, investigators reviewed surveillance footage from the hotel's front desk and the 6th floor hallway. This time, they did uncover a suspicious individual. The footage showed that at 7:07 p.m. on August 18th, a slightly overweight man, approximately 5 feet 7 inches tall, completed the check-in process at the front desk. Around 7:13 p.m., he was seen heading toward room 606, the scene of the murders. Police then reviewed 68 hours of surveillance footage from the 6th floor, spanning from 7 p.m. on August 18th to 3 p.m. on August 21st, when housekeeping staff discovered the bodies in room 606. The results were chilling. Throughout that entire time period, only one man was recorded entering room 606. Based on this, police determined that this man was the prime suspect, and that he was the one who killed Lei Quan and the other 2 victims. To confirm his identity, investigators went to the hotel's front desk. From the registration information and the photocopy of an ID left behind by the man, they learned his name was Zhang Xiaobao. Using the internal police database, officers quickly obtained detailed information. Zhang Xiaobao was born in 1985, originally from Bajong, Sichuan province, and at the time of the murders, he was working as a kitchen assistant at a restaurant in Ningbo. Police immediately went to the restaurant where Xiaobao worked to verify this information. That was when something unexpected happened. Just by looking at Xiaobao's build and appearance, we could tell right away he wasn't the suspect, one officer said. Compared to the man in the surveillance footage, the differences were simply too great. Police observed that Xiaobao and the man seen on camera were completely different, both in body type and height. Moreover, the restaurant owner and Xiaobao's co-workers all confirmed that during the time of the murders, he had been continuously working at the restaurant and had no opportunity to commit the crime. At this point, investigators realized that the killer had used Xiaobao's identity and that Xiaobao himself was entirely unaware his information had been stolen. After failing to confirm the suspect's identity through the hotel registration, police returned their focus to the crime scene. By then, the only remaining piece of evidence that might advance the investigation was Lei Quan's cell phone. A thorough examination of the phone revealed a crucial text message. Lei Quan had received it at 2 p.m. on August 18th, and it read, "I'm coming from Ningbo today. I want to see you." Seeing that the message was sent one day before Lei Quan left home to meet her old friend, police immediately suspected that the sender of the message might be the killer. Investigators then reviewed Lei Quan's call history and discovered that she had been in frequent contact with the sender recently. However, when police attempted to identify the phone number's owner, they found that it was a non-registered prepaid SIM card, making it impossible to trace to a real identity. With that lead exhausted, police once again turned to the hotel's surveillance footage. After reviewing it in full once more, they noticed something critical. After Lei Quan and the 2 children entered room 606, the 5'7" tall man was seen leaving the hotel alone by elevator at just after 2 a.m. on August 20th. As he left, one of his hands was wrapped in a towel, suggesting he had been injured. However, he returned to the hotel again at just after 5 a.m. that same morning. As he rode the elevator upstairs, He was casually eating a steamed bun and calmly checking his reflection in the elevator mirror before exiting and returning to room 606. Just a few minutes later, at 5:14 a.m. on August 20th, the man left the hotel again, and this time he never returned. Based on these clues, police deduced that at around 5 a.m., the suspect had most likely chosen a taxi as his means of transportation. Investigators immediately reviewed all taxi GPS records from 5:14 a.m. on August 20th. The results showed that 3 taxis had stopped near the hotel during that time window. Police recorded the license plate numbers of all 3 vehicles, located the drivers, and began conducting interviews. At this point, the case reached a major breakthrough. One of the 3 taxi drivers, a man surnamed Fang, told police that the passenger who got into his cab outside the hotel was a large, powerfully built man. After getting in, the man instructed him to drive straight to Ningbo. Once they reached Ningbo, the man got out of the taxi, transferred to a motorcycle taxi, and left. Fang had no idea where he went after that. This result was deeply frustrating for investigators. Based on the existing evidence, they were confident that this man was the killer of Lei Quan and the 2 children. But with nothing more than a rough physical description, finding him would be like searching for a needle in a haystack, time-consuming, labor-intensive, and with no guarantee of success. Just then, forensic technicians who had returned to re-examine room 606 brought critical news. They discovered a farewell letter hidden under the single bed where Lei Quan's body had been found. The letter was addressed to the writer's parents. Its contents were filled with remorse and guilt, apologizing to them and urging them to take care of their health. At the end of the letter, it was signed, Feng Ni. With this crucial discovery, police questioned Lei Quan's family. They learned that Lei Quan's older sister had indeed heard the name Feng Ni, though she did not know his real identity. However, she recalled that Feng Ni had previously been dealt with by the Ningbo police. Investigators immediately searched the police database and quickly located a man whose alias matched. The man known as Feng Ni was actually named Mao Ju-Dai, born in February 1986, originally from Bazhong, Sichuan province. In May 2011, Ju-Dai had been convicted of intentional assault and sentenced by the Haishu District People's Court in Ningbo to 10 months in prison, with a 1-year suspended sentence. Even more striking, Ju-Dai's photograph in the police system closely matched the suspect seen in the surveillance footage of the triple homicide. At last, investigators saw a clear path forward. At 6:30 a.m. on August 22, 2011, just 15 hours after the crime, police located Ju-Dai lying exhausted in a hospital bed at Mingzhou Hospital in Ningbo. When confronted by police, Ju-Dai did not deny anything. He confessed to the murders and begged officers not to inform his parents of his crimes. Through his subsequent statements, police gradually pieced together his motive and the full sequence of events. When asked why he killed Lei Quan, the first words out of Ju-Dai's mouth were, "She deceived me." According to Lei Quan's older sister, Ju-Dai and Lei Quan had met while playing cards together. Ju-Dai strongly disputed this account. He told police that in May 2009, he traveled from Sichuan to Ningbo to work as a laborer and rented a room in a residential complex in Yinzhou district. The beauty salon where Lei Quan worked was located on the street directly in front of that complex. From the first time he walked past the salon and saw Lei Quan, Ju-Dai felt she was different from everyone else. Each time he passed by, he looked at her again. Over time, these repeated encounters turned into affection, and eventually, love. One day, unable to control himself any longer, Ju-Dai approached Lei Quan. Like other customers, he took her to a hotel for sex, and afterward continued seeing her several more times. The two gradually grew closer, and Lei Quan began to open up to him, sharing her personal struggles. Lei Quan told Ju-Dai that she lived apart from her husband, sometimes not seeing him even once a year, and that their marriage was deeply unhappy. Already deeply infatuated, Ju-Dai immediately made what he believed was a decisive choice. He would become the hero who rescued Lei Quan from her miserable marriage. After learning of Ju-Dai's feelings, Lei Quan did not reject him and even agreed to be with him. This only reinforced Ju-Dai's confidence, and convinced him that he needed to act quickly to save his lover from her marriage. Before long, Lei Quan moved into Jude's home, and the two began living together. During this time, Jude indulged her completely. Whatever she wanted, he provided. He even took her back to his hometown in Sichuan and formally told his parents that he intended to marry her. Seeing how deeply their son loved Lei Quan, Judy's parents did not object, even knowing she was still married. They agreed to the relationship and even gave Lei Quan a sum of money as a welcome gift, hoping the couple could use it to start a small business together. From that moment on, Judy firmly believed that he and Lei Quan were destined to be together. Her importance in his heart grew steadily, eventually surpassing even his parents. He was convinced they shared a deep, mutual love. But in Lei Quan's eyes, the relationship meant nothing. To her, it was merely a game. After 2 years together, by 2011, Lei Quan still had not divorced her husband as she had promised Jude. The money given by Jude's parents had also been completely spent. Gradually, Jude lost all patience. He felt that Lei Quan had deceived him and taken his money. He repeatedly demanded that she divorce, but she never gave him a clear answer. Each confrontation ended in fierce arguments, followed by one of them storming off. Not only that, Jude even threatened Lei Quan's sister with a knife in an attempt to force her to divorce. Seeing how unhinged he had become, Lei Quan finally realized the seriousness of the situation. She understood that she could not continue entangling herself with him and decided to cut ties completely. Around this time, Judy's father suffered a serious accident at a construction site, falling from a height and ending up in critical condition. While Jude was staying at the hospital to care for his father, Lei Quan packed her belongings, left his residence, and disappeared entirely. After leaving, Lei Quan turned off her phone. No matter how hard Jude tried, he could not reach her. Several days later, perhaps out of momentary sympathy, Lei Quan finally turned her phone back on. Jude managed to call her, but when he begged her to come see his father one last time, Lei Quan coldly replied that she had to stay in her hometown to take care of her child and did not have time to visit his father. That response struck Jude as unbearably heartless. After all, his parents had always treated her kindly, yet she refused to visit even once while his father was hovering between life and death. Standing beside his father's hospital bed and thinking about everything he had given Lei Quan, Jude suddenly came to a painful realization. He understood that the relationship had always been one-sided. Lei Quan had never loved him at all. To take revenge on what he saw as her cruelty, Jude boarded a long-distance bus to Chuzhou, sent Lei Quan a message arranging to meet on August 19th, and prepared to settle accounts with her once and for all. Before going to meet Lei Quan, Jude had already purchased a dagger and rat poison. He had thought everything through. When he met Lei Quan, he would force her to think clearly and make a final choice, who she truly wanted to live with. If Lei Quan chose him, they would live well together. If she did not choose him, he would kill her and then end his own life. On August 19th, Lei Quan brought her daughter and niece to the hotel where Jude was staying, just as they had agreed. When the two met face to face and Jude presented her with his ultimatum, one or the other, Lei Quan showed no hesitation. She firmly insisted on ending the relationship and returning to her family. Upon hearing her answer, the last trace of hope in Jude's heart completely vanished. He was utterly disillusioned. In that moment, he made the decision to carry out the plan he had already prepared and force Lei Quan to pay the price. At around 1 a.m. on August 20th, while Lei Quan, her daughter, and her niece were all sound asleep, Jude pulled out the dagger he had prepared and mercilessly stabbed Lei Quan. Caught completely off guard, Lei Quan screamed in terror. Her cries woke her daughter and niece. Seeing Lei Quan covered in blood, the two children panicked and began screaming as well. But Jude had completely lost his humanity. He showed them no mercy. After ensuring that Lei Quan was dead, he turned the knife on the two young girls and killed them as well. After committing the murders, Jude did not immediately leave the scene. Instead, he attempted to carry out the final part of his plan. However, what he never expected was that even ending his own life proved impossible. He tried 6 times in a row, and every attempt failed. This was a sequence of actions so disturbing that I will not describe them in detail. There was almost nothing he didn't try, yet none of it worked. Still, Judah refused to give up. He convinced himself that if he couldn't die in Chuzhou, then he would return to Ningbo. Surely, he thought, he would succeed there. At 5:11 a.m., Judah returned to room 606, took the cash from Lei Quan's handbag, and then took a taxi straight back to Ningbo. After returning to his rented room in Ningbo, Judy began another series of extreme actions. He cut the power cord from an electric kettle, wrapped the exposed wires around his hands, and believed the electric current would surely kill him. Instead, the circuit breaker immediately tripped, cutting off the power. Realizing that suicide in the room had failed, Judy ran out onto the street. He gave 50 yuan to a man riding a 3-wheeled bicycle and asked him to buy a bottle of pesticide. He then purchased a length of rope, walked to a small roadside hill in Hengshi town, and drank the pesticide there. After swallowing the poison, he tied the rope to a tree. But just as he was about to step forward, the pesticide began to take effect. He was struck with intense abdominal pain, completely losing his strength and becoming unable to move. He then rolled down the hillside and was later discovered by passing villagers who rushed him to the hospital, saving his life. That was why police eventually found him in a hospital bed. Finally, on March 7, 2012, the Chuzhou Intermediate People's Court issued its first instance verdict. Jude was sentenced to death for intentional homicide and ordered to compensate the families of the 3 victims 100,000 yen each. A man who had tried 6 times to end his own life and failed ultimately faced the death penalty under the law. Perhaps this was fate's way of forcing him to live long enough to receive the punishment he deserved. 2 cases, 2 countries, 2 different time periods, yet both stemmed from the same source: distorted, unreciprocated love. Mingsen Shui obsessed over his teacher for 15 years, turning one-sided affection into kidnapping, imprisonment, and sexual abuse. Jude became consumed by a woman who treated him as nothing more than a game, and when the illusion shattered, he turned his so-called love into a blade that cut down even innocent children. Both men believed they had the right to possess another human being. Both were incapable of accepting rejection, and both allowed their extreme selfishness to destroy not only the lives of others, but their own as well. Shui will die in prison. Jude has already been executed, but the wounds they left, on Mary's body, in Beth's memories, and in the hearts of the families of innocent victims, will never fully heal. True love is never about possession, and when someone turns emotion into chains, into a blade, it is no longer love. It is a crime. Thank you for watching. I'll see you again in the next video.